Welcome to the Highlands Current podcast. I'm Chip Rowe, the editor of The Current. In each episode, our reporters will take you behind the scenes as they speak with residents of the Highlands about their interests, passions, and adventures. I spoke recently with Rupert Holmes, who lives in Cold Spring. He's known for many things. In 1979, his song Escape, the Pina Colada Song, hit #1 on the Billboard charts. In 1985, his musical whodunit, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which was based on Charles Dickens' last unfinished novel, opened on Broadway and won 5 Tony Awards, including to Holmes for Best Book of a Musical and Best Original Score. I spoke with Rupert not about any of that, but about his New York Times bestselling mystery, Murder Your Employer, The McMasters Guide to Homicide. A sequel, Murder Your Mate, is scheduled for publication in 2025. So here's our conversation.
Well, so the book is presented, as a handbook. I mean, where did that come from? Where did that idea come from? Is that sort of an inspiration or something you thought about a while?
I couldn't help but notice I had already published a couple of mystery novels and some mystery musicals as well on Broadway. And I couldn't help but notice that in the bookstores, there's a how-to guide to almost every subject under the sun. I've seen tattoos for dummies, which sounds like a really bad idea, teaching yourself how to tattoo. I've seen the Talmud. I've seen tiny houses for dummies. There's everything. And I thought, as a mystery writer, what would a idiot's guide to homicide look like? And I thought I could write that, but that would be a novelty book. That would be a short book that you'd find up at the checkout counter. I wanted to write a book that would give people a new universe in which they could escape. And so I thought of this, instead of a textbook about how to murder, tongue in cheek, I thought I could create a campus where there would be such a textbook. And a kind of as I describe, a finishing school for finishing people off, a very elegant, luxurious, dreamy world in which you learn to do in others as you would have others do you in.
Harry Potter comes to mind, of course, when you start the book, and especially with kind of the scene you set with the buildings and that kind of thing. Was that in your mind as well?
No, I've never read a Harry Potter book, never seen a Harry Potter movie. But what I did base it upon were some of the wonderful campuses that I've known in my life. My first year of college was at Syracuse University. They've got a gorgeous campus, and the quadrangle at McMasters is sort of patterned after that. My second novel was set in part at UC Berkeley. The Berkeley campus is a gorgeous campus, old. One of the things I love about college campuses is that they're one of the few places that don't really change that much over the years. Walk around Harvard is still, they may put up a new building now and then, but most of the landscape, most of the plant life and the buildings are identical, including the various houses. So I knew I wanted this to be a period piece because I don't think you could get away with some of these murders with current forensic science. So I knew it would be something that would be set in the best part of the 50s. And so I thought this campus would be an ideal thing. But no, it was not based on Harry Potter.
Have you planned a murder? I mean, how far have you gone in your imagination?
I save all of that for the books themselves. Agatha Christie was not a sociopath. She is not the worst serial killer in the history of humanity. I think that mystery writers, generally the ones I've met, are very gentle people, and any kind of homicidal instincts they might have gets vented in great detail within the pages of a book. I think mystery novels are actually a very reassuring book to society. At the beginning of the mystery, the world is fine. A terrible deed, a crime against not only a human being, but against our social structure is committed, and anarchy reigns. Then comes the wise detective who makes sense of that which baffles us and justice is done and the world is restored to order. It's a very reassuring kind of book.
I find the challenge, or I would imagine the challenge for mysteries is you have to provide enough clues, enough information to the reader, but not too much. But then when the reader gets to the end, they can't feel like, well, he didn't tell me half of that. I would have solved it if I'd known the details are now revealing. Does that strike you as accurate?
Yeah, that's a very accurate statement. There's a trick I've picked up over the years, which is if you have information that to play fair with the reader, you must convey to them, try to embed it in a joke or in a descriptive passage. And they will think that they are reading that to be entertained. I've always found, even in the musicals I write, if you have some bit of exposition that you must state for the audience to understand the story, if you put it in a joke, they won't know they're being lectured. They think they'll just laugh and absorb the joke. And then when it crops up and it proves the joke was a clue, they think, well, I did know it. I just didn't take it seriously.
Well, you know, the book is very funny. You have a lot of puns, a lot of one-liners. Where did you develop that sense of wit?
I had witty parents. My father was a bright Juilliard graduate who loved show business. He played in the big band era. And he had a kind of Mel Brooks type of humor. Whereas my mother was a wonderful, literate British young woman that my father met during World War II while serving in the army. And she had a very British wit. So she raised me on a lot of Noel Coward and Oscar Wilde. And my father raised me on a lot of Jerry Lewis and a lot of Sid Caesar. That's why half of the McMasters novel is sort of British in tone. Dean Harbinger Harrow is if not an Oxford Don with a droll sense of humor. And the other half is a regular ordinary Joe, Cliff Iverson, who's got a nice self-mocking humor. He doesn't take himself too seriously, and he jokes about the dilemmas he's in. So you get sort of that balance.
So when you're writing a mystery, any of your mysteries, do you know the ending when you start writing?
I do.
Is that important? Is that vital, you think?
Oh, yeah. It's vital. What I will say is that sometimes I'm not positive. When I write a mystery, I am very aware, and whether this is a mystery in a novel, a mystery in a short story, or a mystery for the Broadway stage, I'm very aware of what the major turns are going to be, the twists, the reveals. It's all working from that. It's a bit of a magic act in that way. Sometimes, especially in a novel, I will not know at a certain point how I'm going to get there. And I always know that I'm doing well in one of my novels when something I've put in the book for another purpose turns out to facilitate the next turn I must take. In other words, I will be sitting there. It's sort of like I'll be sitting there and I'll say, what's he going to do next? How's he going to get, I know he's got to get to X, but how? And then I think, oh, of course, he would take and I'll think of something that happened 4 chapters back that I did not put there for that purpose. That's how I know I'm doing well with a TV script or a novel, is that I believe in the characters, I believe in the universe they live in which they live, and things around them become very helpful to make the plot happen. But I do usually know, I always know who done it or what the fate of people will be. I usually know the last page, even as I'm starting the first page.
Do you get writer's block, though? Do you get to a point where you're not sure where to take it? Although if you know the ending, I guess, like you said, you're just figuring out the route rather than where you're going to end up.
I wrote a TV series for the AMC TV network before Mad Men, before they did Mad Men, called Remember When, WENN, about a radio station in Pittsburgh in 1939. We called it alternately a dramedy, and sometimes we called it a comma. And I wrote 56 episodes of that series. And we were so close to the bone in terms of finances and schedule that sometimes I would sit down on a Thursday to write an episode that would be filmed on a Monday, and I could not have writer's block or the series would be destroyed. I had to deliver. And I found what for me is the best solution to any case of writer's block. And that is, do not think, what shall I write next? Do not think, how shall I impress the reader with my prowess? Think, if you believe in your characters and you believe in the world they're in and you believe in the dilemma they face, all you have to do is say, well, what would they do next? What would they do next? And there are many times, many sections of every book I've ever written where the characters are dictating what the action is, and I'm taking it all down like a stenographer, where I can barely keep up with them. And sometimes the jokes that appear in a book of mine, I will laugh at them out loud because I think it's funny. I'll say, oh, that's a funny thing because they said it. I didn't say it. So it's a matter of believing in your characters, considering them real, believing in everything around them, and then saying, well, given what you know about them and what they're dealing with, what would they actually do? Don't invent anything, just follow them, pursue them.
Can you tell me anything about Murder Your Mate? What is it? Does it have a date it's coming out? Anything you can reveal?
We were hoping for Valentine's Day, but I think I've missed that. Maybe we'll be aiming for June and honeymoons. What I can tell you is that from the outset, the dean explains that the secrets shared in volume 2, Murder Your Mate, are not a substitute for divorce. That they do, that the phrase "till death do us part" is a vow, not an appointment. But what I have found is the word mate can mean many different things, and I think I've found some circumstances under which almost anyone would say murdering that mate is more than justifiable. I have to stack the deck in these books. You understand that? I can't have you murdering nice people or murdering for profit. It has to be that that's your only choice. As I say in the second of the 4 rules of McMasters, if somebody makes your life so difficult that you just cannot continue, then to delete them is merely a case of involuntary suicide.
Did you come up with the rules before you got into the book? I mean, you have to set the rules, right? It's a school. It can't just be, there has to be some kind of criteria for justifiable deletion. What boundaries are we going to put on a murder?
Yeah. I had to find some kind of faux moral code that might make such a nonsensical idea seem almost feasible. I was always impressed in Isaac Asimov's I, Robot that he began the book with the laws of robotics. And that is the rules that are programmed into robots so that they will always be a beneficial invention. And I thought, I've got to create my own kind of ethical code here. And so the very first thing I did was to come up with the 4 inquiries. It's kind of like this. Of course, people say I could just kill so-and-so and they never do anything about it. But we have had people in our life, most of us, I think, I don't think this is overstating it, where we can say to ourselves, gee, I wish I'd never met them. And it's not very far from, gee, I wish I'd never met them, to say, boy, the world would be a better place without them. And if you can go that far, and there are people who you know that their existence has been primarily to cause other people suffering or heartbreak, or then it's not very far from that to go from I could just kill him to I could just kill him, which is just a slight difference of
inflection. It's all about inflection.
It's all about the inflection. So yes, I made those rules to try to say, is murder the only option you have? Have you given your victim every chance in the world to redeem themselves? Is there anyone who would mourn or suffer from their loss? And will the world be a better place without them? And to me, if you can pass those 4 bars, it's only a matter of just committing a small backspace in their life. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite mystery writer?
I have a couple. Behind me, there's an entire row of just about every Agatha Christie. I think people even though she's, I think, arguably the best-selling author of all time. I think people don't always understand that she is not Colonel Mustard in the ballroom with the wrench. She's a very human writer, and most of her mysteries center around people in stifling relationships or yearning. And she was a very romantic writer, and I love her characters. I'm also incredibly fond of the mystery stories by G.K. Chesterton regarding Father Brown. There is a Father Brown TV series, but other than the name and sort of there's no resemblance. The books are as exquisitely written. They might as well be poems, and they are about the morality of murder, the immorality of murder, and every story seems to be a bit miraculous and have some of the most beautiful descriptive writing anyone has ever done. G.K. Chesterton. And one day I was plugging G.K. Chesterton. I was on the Merv Griffin show, and sitting next to me was Orson Welles. And I'm talking to Merv, which is being between Orson Welles and Merv Griffin is like being between a rock and a soft place. And I for suddenly I found that everything I was saying was to impress Orson Welles. The audience was probably turning off their TV in droves, but I was trying, and I mentioned G.K. Chesterton, my love of his writing. And on the commercial break, Orson Welles leaned over and said, "It does my heart good to know that there's a young man like yourself who appreciates G.K. Chesterton. You know, H.G. Wells once told me that G.K. Chesterton," and he told me a story that H.G. Wells had told him. And I thought, I'm sitting here and Orson Welles is telling me a story about what H.G. Wells would, if I'm having a dream, nobody wake me, please. So yeah, I love them. And Ellery Queen, which was the pen name of the mystery writers who created that mystery character. I started reading him at a very early age because he wore glasses and I had to wear glasses. And I thought, oh, a hero of a book can wear glasses.
Could you recommend one book by each of those 3 for me?
With Agatha Christie, I would say that The Murder of Roger Ackroyd has one of the most breathtaking reveals, and even that's revealing too much. She set the mystery writing field back on its heels with that book. I also think Death on the Nile is a magnificent work and a heartbreaking work. As Murder on the Orient Express, everybody seems to know it, but it is a tour de force and wonderful atmosphere. So those 3 would be. Oh, there's one I love called Five Little Pigs with the alternative title. Really, Five Little Pigs. Seriously.
No, I know, but I asked for one. I can't stop
I know.
you.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In terms of G.K. Chesterton, he didn't write any mystery novels, but if you get any collection of the mysteries of the Father Brown mysteries and pick any one of the 56 stories, you will be rewarded magnificently. And Ellery Queen, a lot of people love. Let me see. Hold on. There's one of his books. It's called Cat of Many Tales, and it is a story about a serial killer in Manhattan, and it is a wonderful evocation, if that's a word, of New York City in the late 1940s. It's just it reeks of New York City, and it's got quite a twist ending. And then a lot of people think Calamity Town. He wrote 3 mysteries set in a rustic town that could have been Cold Spring. One was called Calamity Town. That's amazing. 10 Days Wonder is stunning. And The Murder is a Fox is one that people really think is very clever. My memories of it are not that distinct. But anyway, so those would be.
So once I finish your book.
Well, no, once you finish my book, you'll have to read the sequel, and you mustn't read anything else in between.
I was just going to say, and then read Murder Your Mate. That's going to go over really well if I read that in bed. Or maybe she'll be reading it first. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, I was tempted. Here's the thing. if I wrote the book, if the book was Murder Your Husband, women would have no problem buying that book and bringing it home. Because that's funny. Every time I mentioned, whenever I mentioned to a book group that the next volume is Murder Your Mate, any woman who's with her husband has a tendency to look at me and say, will you hurry up on that one? But if I had called it Murder Your Wife, that would not elicit the same reaction from people in the household. I've tried to make that's a little too close to home. I toyed with the idea of having flip covers. So one side's wife and one, but even that's too much. So I tried to do Murder Your Mate as a less controversial title.
Thank you again. I appreciate the time.
Enjoyed it. I appreciate the reading you give me. Thank you for that.
Thank you for listening to the Highlands Current podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, leave us a review on your listening app of choice, and consider becoming a member of the Current. The paper and website and this podcast are offered free to the community, paid for with support from our readers and listeners. To join for as little as $24 annually, visit highlandscurrent.org/join. That's highlandscurrent.org/join. Or catch up anytime on the latest news at highlandscurrent.org or pick up a copy of the print paper every Friday. Thanks again. I'm Chip Rowe, editor of The Current, and we'll see you next time.